All right, after technical difficulty. So Sandra, what I had you have was hope is that which moves from the stillness when I fully open to an embrace. To have two things, that all hope is gone, or embrace my hopeless state.
Yeah, embrace my hope. Yeah, my hopeless state. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, and surrender my hopeless state. Fully embrace and surrender my hopeless state. Yeah. And hope is not external. In this, hope is part of yeah, I don't know what it's a part of, but it's not external. I'm going to close my door. Sorry. Yeah. Daniel, you're muted. Yeah.
So we'll do the turn, right? Okay. It's not external, it's something else. It's part of something else. Could you just describe what comes to your mind in that sense?
Well, it doesn't come from outside of me. It comes from within me, but only when I surrender that state or perspective that I'm holding on to, that all is hopeless. You know, it arises once that is surrendered.
It's interesting that we come back to surrender again. I'll just not make a note on that. So in surrendering the hopeless state, we find ourselves in hope, and it comes from somewhere within.
Yeah, somewhere that is more primeval, I suppose, or more primary than the hopeless state. It's the reality. It's sort of like that hopeless state has an unreality about it, because it's conditional and it's, you know, the result of experience and perceptions and all that stuff. So it's yeah, I mean, it weighs me, it can weigh me down, but in fact, it's not real. What is real is this, and even the word hope, when I'm using the word hope now as compared to hopeless, it seems like there's a dichotomy there. And they're part of the same thing, but they're not. The hope is more of a fullness. Yeah, more of a, you know, of the good, the redemptive, the true reality of me, of what I am. But I only can experience, well, I can only touch on that, or it can only move in me fully once I acknowledge and surrender this hopeless state, this hopelessness, which I am falsely attached to.
Mhm.
And there's an addictive quality of hopelessness. It's very addictive.
Mhm.
So it's hard to fully embrace and surrender because it is so addictive. You think it's real.
I just saw in your body language was that as soon as when you were talking about hope, or that which is beyond this hopeless state, which we have to surrender, doing a lot of gesturing of your hands, and kindling a fullness that we can perhaps not really only hint at with words. But the other thing is, I noticed when you started talking about hopelessness, and your body was just, there was no hand gesturing anymore, and it was more like a, it's like can't, there's no
life.
There's more like a kind of like a seizure or something. We're stuck.
Yeah, it's a seizure. Yeah.
So you were talking about hopelessness, and that it's more like addiction, despair. How can I say it? In order that virtue, that hope becomes or is a virtue, so surrender.
I see where you're driving. Yeah, like in order, this is what I've described as hope. How do I enact that as a virtue? Is that your question? Yeah. It's because it's not only me. I am surrounded by hopelessness. I'm surrounded by others who suffer as I do from this hopelessness. And I must be open to and fully embrace, acknowledge, and stay with this seeming reality of my hopelessness. Stay with it. Don't, sort of stay with it through to whatever is true of it, which is nothing is true of it. But I have to stay with that and see it through in myself, and then be able to be present to it in others as well. I have to fully open to others. And in that way, I practice hope as a participatory enactment. It's not only for myself, but it requires courage and honesty and like openness and all the other virtues, humility, I don't know, all that.
So you did this a couple of times. It is staying with the hopelessness.
Staying with it, yeah.
So what role in the state of hopelessness, when there's just nothing, as you say, and it is also in a sense, there's a pure nothingness. How in this state, where does hope come from? How can
So this staying with is like the faith part that we have, that we've talked about, you know, there, it's sort of like everything looks as though it's hopeless. Everything looks as though it's completely the end. It all looks like it's real. And what I mean by staying with is seeing through that veil, seeing through that, the unreality of that, seeing through the impermanence, the lack of any substance of it, seeing through that, practicing all of those virtues, and then hope is hope arises of its own. I don't have to pull it in. It's a grace. It comes by grace. I think, yeah, hope is. I think hope is related to grace somehow. I think it is real hope.
real hope is related to grace?
True hope.
True hope.
Yeah. Yeah, it comes through our tears, for example. Yeah. Our full being with our suffering, our hopelessness. Yeah. It just arises by grace. Yeah. It's like it can't be otherwise. Yeah.
So in hope, we anticipate an element that arises or comes on its own, which is something like grace. And our tears are like announcing that grace.
Yeah.
Now there's again an element.
Yeah.
There's an element which we I mean, this is an element which this blissful grace, we cannot control that. This is out of our hand. But we, in a sense, it's hope is something like so we are ready to see that grace or accept it also. And also surrender ourselves to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And fully abase ourselves, really, Yeah.
Now, since I actually didn't hear your first proposal, I would like to ask you now, what is hope, Sandra?
Oh, okay. Well, hope is that which arrives on the wings of grace when we fully surrender to our hopelessness and that hopeless, that of others. It's important that the other part is really important. It's not a solitary thing. Yeah, we have to open to others.
There's a participation.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll repeat. Hope is that which arrives on wings of grace when we fully surrender to our hopelessness and that of others.
Yep, I'm happy with that. We'll start there.
Okay. I'm just looking at my notes. So it was it was a little bit weird for me because I dropped out and I dropped in, and it was almost as if you were already in the middle of the turn. What I got was that you were placing a lot of emphasis on surrendering.
Mhm.
And I don't know exactly how you came to hopelessness as kind of like the locus where even something like hope could arise in the first place.
Yeah, it seems that, I mean, what maybe what that is related to is this aversion that I did have to the word hope,
Mhm.
because, you know, being so hopeless for so long, right? And I don't know how it, I don't know how it has happened for me. That all I know is that the hopelessness was what I knew as the reality of things. This is the way things are. You know, I knew that. I was dead sure about that. I was dead right about that. But somehow, probably through these practices and through the participation in these practices and this way of communicating and being with each other in this way, sharing, it's not as if that reality, that conditional reality has disappeared and everything's wonderful in the, you know, like, it's not that way at all, because everything is not wonderful. But in the midst of all this hope and it seems like there's a deeper, there's a true reality somewhere that by grace has shown its face. Right. So yeah, I can't really say anything other than that in terms of, you know, the relationship of hopelessness and hope, because in a way they're not related. They're two different realities. Well, I don't know. They seem to be related, but in a sense they're not.
But then that's interesting, because right, hope, when you say, right, there's this, it comes on the wings of grace, you know, it announces itself in the midst of that hopelessness.
Yeah.
Then it's, I would say it's then what you are describing is something else than what is kind of false hope, which we usually, right, which we would usually say, I hope things will get better. Like, it has to be birthed in the midst of that kind of despair, hopelessness that you were describing. That's at least what I got really hearing from you. And then you were emphasizing this is not just a solitary thing. I hope in right? I hope something, but it's a participatory thing. Kind of
Exactly.
like
Yeah.
it's embracing the others as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
That can, I mean,
And probably that's, I mean, there may be some, eremitical saints who have such a relationship with God that participation affords, that their participation in God affords that kind of grace.
mhm,
But that's not true of me. My participation is with others in real life, yeah. But
I
it
thi-
has to be participatory.
I
I think
think,
it,
yeah,
think it has to be what, dialogical participatory
yeah.
in order for it to show its true form, hope.
I think that just points to a very simple metaphysical truth. We do not exist as isolated substances, but our personhood can only emerge dialogically and relationally.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's
Exactly.
so then that hope is by nature communal or relational is just a very sensible thought, I would say. All right. Are you fine? Can I go to?
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay. There's a mystery there. I think I said this to you last week as well. So when we listened to this Dialectic-into-Dialogos session with John and Chris and Guy last week, and there were these elements: faith, and love, and hope as kind of symbolic agent between those two. And what was actually lacking for me was this element of hopelessness, because our hope is never static, but it's always kind of like it's torn asunder by, I don't know, life, bad events, catastrophes, betrayal, corruption,
Constantly. Yeah.
And I thought that hope has to go through the furnace of doubt. We learned that from, I don't know, the story of Job is a good example from the Bible, but there are many examples of religious practice where I would say that's true. Now, when Sandra, when you were doing your proposal, I was kind of, that was very strong for me, that there's an element, absolutely, that hope has to go through the hopelessness and the doubting perhaps as the kind of active hopelessness that we're perpetuating, and it has to go through that. And then at some point there of course, again, we get glimpses of eternity that announces itself by grace. Now you said, however, that hope is in a sense the action of surrender.
It arises as a result of the action.
Yeah. Hope arises as a result of the action of surrender. Okay. Now the cool, I don't know, I just see this in my head. The cool thing is that these things that the doubt and the faith and love all have this element of surrendering. at least as when I think about it, these elements that we've also with this other practice, they all have this element of surrendering. In love, I give myself over to the other.
Yeah.
In faith, I give myself over to God or the transcendental self. So,
Yeah. Faith
and
in
in-
things unseen. So
in-
that sort of faith in things unseen, hope for
and in doubt, I give myself over to, in a sense, the suffering of others and the suffering in the world, which just makes it hard to believe in all these things. So one also has to actively doubt. This is really a part of religious practice. We have to also doubt, because this is important. Doubt has always been important also in how we come to knowledge and come to know things. Every truth has to go through doubt in some sense. So, I don't know where I want to go from here. I don't know.
Well, I have a question for you.
Sure.
What is hope?
I'm writing.
I feel like in an aporetic state. I've hit the wall a little bit. I see these four elements. So faith, I see grace, I see doubt, I see love. They all have something to do with surrendering. I kind of have I have difficulty, I think, to put it into proposition at this moment right now.
Does hope do something with those things that you mentioned?
Yeah, it puts hope is like it needs all of these elements. They are constitutive for hope. Without those things, love, faith, surrender, doubt, there's no hope, I think. So hope is a kind of like a dynamic, dynamic nexus point of all these other elements. What all these other elements are doing, in a sense, they're putting us into relationship to realities we cannot fathom fully. That's a kind of inexhaustibility that in the sense of faith, it's kind of like the inexhaustibility, or really the sheer beyondness of eternity. And kind of love, it's an inexhaustibility of this mystery, perhaps, of agape, of person making. Love is very mysterious. What really goes on in love, what it affords, and so on. But also, there's also in doubt itself, in this suffering, in this hopelessness, there's a kind of inexhaustibility. I mean, just the theodicy question is usually the deepest and most difficult question for believers in faith. How is all this suffering and this evil permitted by God? And so hope is in a sense binding us to all of these inexhaustible and utterly mysterious realities. But it helps us, it gives us a way of participating with them, despite their unknowability.
Yeah. So hope is in some way binds us to the inexhaustible.
Yeah, in all these facets.
Yeah.
Because
In all the
there's
facets.
also a strange inexhaustibility to despair. I mean,
Yeah.
until you reach really the bottom of despair, it's kind of a long way. And suffering often seems to be inexhaustible, like just goes on and on and on.
Daniel, I've been writing down as you've gone through some of this. So can I give it back to you, the progression of your thought? I wrote down, hope is that which is constituted by the inexhaustible and mysterious realities of faith, doubt and suffering, doubt/suffering, grace and love. And through the act of surrender, the result is that we are put into relationship with the real.
Yeah, that sounds good.
So I mean, it's a long way of putting it, but that was the progression of your.
So we surrender in faith, we surrender in love, we surrender in doubt. And
yeah,
that
surrendering to all of that results in us being put into relationship with the real.
I mean, perhaps how my body wants to express this is perhaps in this, I don't know, a kind of faithful anticipation that this, like someone in prayer or also in meditation, so you can receive the grace. You bring yourself into kind of position or holding or posture or countenance of anticipation such that you become capable of holding yourselves to these inexhaustible, mysterious realities and participate with them.
Yeah.
No.
It binds you to the inexhaustible.
Or lets me surrender to, perhaps. Just the same.
Yeah. Let's see, surrender to. Yeah.
It's kind of, it's more, I don't know, perhaps the or heritage of Platonic Christianity. I just see something descending from above. I hold the hands up so I can receive it. It's more like this. It's more like receiving,
Oh,
kind of the gracious receiving of the kind of
placing ourselves in the attitude of surrender to.
yes.
Yeah.
Whether we sit on the under the Bodhi tree and wait that something comes into the palms of our hands, or whether it's like I'm just like doing this, waiting that something comes from the sky, something like that. It's not so much a binding as it is really kind of like an anticipation.
Yeah.
Because this grace is not in our hands, so it's not, I cannot decide or will it, or
No.
we had this, right? I had this with Ivo De Gennaro. He also loves surrendering, and he has, this other element is that we can't control it. We just have to be open and surrender to it, and even abandon all our hopes, and that it eventually comes to us. It's hoping for the unhopable. It's just this. So it's not so much a binding as it is I don't know, waiting, enduring, bearing, something like that. Holding out.
Right. Right. Right.
What I was doing was cutting through it. It was sort of enduring and holding to the anticipation of,
yeah.
Is that the virtue of hope then, this holding to?
The virtue is, the virtue is a holding to these three elements: faith, love, and doubt. And despite everything, despite everything, that you're still open to the mystery.
So you're holding to, and you're at the same time open.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And just maybe to also emphasize this, the difficult thing is, for example, to have faith while being in doubt, or to love while being in doubt. That's like to be this middle point between these extreme contradictions. That's really a lot that this virtue wants from us. Like when I don't know, when you.
Well, these were Christ's last words on the cross. Right? He was at that point.
Yeah, he was doubting.
Yeah.
Is hope the thing that allows you to love in the presence of doubt? Like, is that what?
I would say so. To have for example, when let's say maybe this example, when you're in a concentration camp, perhaps you're doubting everything, but perhaps you can still love the other people who are around, and you're not becoming a full-on nihilist also. Perhaps you can still have faith while being in the midst of this extreme situation that lets you doubt everything.
Yeah.
And we often find ourselves as human beings in extreme contradictions.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Hope is that virtue that lets us endure that in a sense. But I mean, this is a very difficult
It's
thing.
cool. We keep getting this sense as you're talking. It's like hope seems to be this towardness. This, like when hope is present, I can more turn toward something, right? I can turn toward the situation and bear it, right? Hope seems to be something about this
Mhm.
affording a turning toward the most dire situation, right?
Mhm. Yeah, that turning. And was it, I'm not sure of the actual words, but did not Christ turn his eyes to God when he said, Father, why have you? I'm not sure about that.
That could be. I'm not
Yeah.
sure. No.
Yeah. Is that point of turning was.
Yeah, I'm appreciating the yeah, that there's this, I'm thinking about with this guy, Gabriel, this guy Gabriel
Marcel?
Marcel.
Yeah.
He talks about a hope that isn't a hoping for. And I like that because it's like it seems to highlight a turning toward, like this turning towardness, right?
Mhm.
With hope. It in because when I hope for an outcome or something like that, right? There's there it puts some kind of limit on what hope points towards in some sense, right? And you can get really delusional about that.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's kind of constraining hope into kind of subject-object relation.
That's right.
Which
It's
it-
totally conditional.
Which
Totally,
it isn't. It's not even
Yeah.
so much so that the thing we have this in control. That's so much.
Yeah. It's like something about, it's like a comportment, this turning towards like a comportment that's, yeah, it's not subject object. It's something like it's ecstatic, right? It's this standing out,
Mhm.
right? It's standing out from the midst of what I'm in, but in a way that has me stand in at the same time. It's this
Mhm.
in and out movement, right? Stand out and toward in this way. Yeah, it's a mystery, right? It's like I want to say it's because if we look at it, as Heidegger points out, there's this, we are futural, right? It's like we can't not be futural, right? So we're always in our we're caring about a future, whether or not we're conscious of it or not, or just the fact that we are is already a anticipation of a future and a caring about one. And so this kind of, this caring about a future, right, has me in a situation that affords me to be able to hope about it in some sense, right? I don't know exactly how that's different than just time, the way that we're the way that we're temporal, right? Yeah, this one's, I mean, I have to go here in just a couple of minutes anyways, but so we can maybe pick my side of this up. But yeah, I want to look at, like, there's something ontological about the primordial sense of hope,
Mhm.
right? In that there's this sense where I think I'm always, if I'm turned towards anything and moving towards it, right, or anticipating a future, it seems hope is always in the works, right?
Mhm.
Like if I'm like moving towards something in the future and oriented towards something in the future, I'm doing that because there's something I'm hoping for, right? There's a hope there, whether or not it's articulated or not. Like, so there's something, it seems like hope maybe isn't this thing that is there or not there. Maybe it's always the case that
Yeah.
there's the structure of hope, and
Mhm.
that despair, right, is that very structure of hope, right? Like, it's the despair is something like it is the same structure in some sense, right?
Yeah.
Without its turning toward, or without it seeming like there's anything to turn toward, right? But that turning toward is there, right?
Mhm.
So I would imagine that, like, it's that primordial sense, right, of being a human being, continually turning toward or finding myself toward a future, and hope, especially when it's in dire circumstances, right? Hope is that thing that affords me to still turn toward it, like in the concentration step, to still orient and comport myself, um, to yeah, I keep getting turning a towardness is the word that just keeps coming up. This toward which I open to, I orient through, I see through, and I don't even need to know what it is, right? But
No.
it's
Since you
something,
Yeah,
yeah,
since you mentioned Heidegger, I think we could also talk about this in sense of infinitude and finitude, because despair has a lot to do with finitude.
Finitude, yeah.
It's like when suddenly the towardness, like the infinite towardness or so is like suddenly is cut off, and I can only see the finiteness of everything.
It's a
Then
lot.
usually I'm falling in despair.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
hope is perhaps something like the overcoming of finitude in an anticipation of infinity or so.
yeah,
Because
And
now,
hope, yeah, and hope moves, always moves, whether it's,
yeah,
you know, I mean, as you're talking about time, it's both time and space. They're both the same. it moves, it moves, it moves. And despair tries to, stop the wall,
Yeah,
but nonetheless, hope
yeah,
nonetheless moves.
totally. Yeah. So like hope is something like it's the thing that activates my faith, right? In being able to trust, have faith in,
Mhm.
um, moving toward it anyways,
Mhm.
right? Like it's like something to
Yeah.
do with it's what lets me
Oh, right,
not know,
right. Yes,
right?
it's kind of the overall activation of all of
Yeah,
them, of
yeah,
all of the virtues, maybe.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And like, and it's like in some sense, especially if you just think about a circumstance of where there's just no, you can't see anything that at all circumstantial lets you know that there's anything other than more of what you see, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And when one finds it's like it's like has this element of like where you can reach beyond it. It's like it goes it's something other than knowing, right? It's like that I can somehow, that there's something beyond what I can see or know
Mhm. Mhm.
that is in some way um present to me,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Mhm.
And that, and maybe hope is something like that, whatever way, um that which is beyond what I can see, right? um the way it reaches me, the way I reach it, right?
Mhm.
Maybe hope is that through line
Mhm.
to faith, right? To
Mhm.
faith in something that I can't name, I can't see, right? Um, but allows me to like basically meet the situation,
Mhm.
right? In some way. It's this kind of meeting. So I think about hope, there's always like an openness to, a turning toward, yeah, that sense of it. And I think like maybe hope is that is that thing that connects me to the inexhaustible,
Mhm.
right?
Mm.
Basic to your nature.
Yeah, 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 totally, totally.
You have to go.
Yeah, I gotta go.
Yeah.
All right, you guys,
Okay.
much love.
Next
Bye.
week. Yeah.
You got it.
We'll
Bye.
talk about next week.
Okay.
Yeah.